in lieu of having meeting minutes. So we have an obligation to do that for open meeting law requirements. So first things, welcome. Quick overview of the agenda for today. We'll start with introductions. Then we have some, I'll call it administrative work and housekeeping around meetings moving forward, which includes setting a schedule, some proposed invited guests, I would say, and also walking through the plan that we here at the Agency of Digital Services has put together for this effort that started in July, but it really only started in earnest in December. We have an obligation to go through some essential supply chain language, a draft legislative report, and then open discussion, questions and answers. My gut says we will probably get a lot of the what are we going to do and stuff as part of the introduction discussion. So without any further ado, I want to turn it over to the Agency of Digital Services Secretary and State CIO, Denise Riley Hughes, to start our introductions and kick us off.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Sean. I don't think at this point I do have to introduce myself, given that Sean Naylor just did.
Capricorn?
And excuse me?
Capricorn?
Sure, yes, that works. I know I am listed as the chair of this committee, and this council rather. And over the course of the next few meetings, I will be assigning Mr. Naylor as my designee. So we will support these meetings over the course of the next two, but it is something that as our project special programs director rather, that Sean is going to be taking on for me. And what I'd love to do is go around the council members, and it would be helpful in this room to cover the folks that are on site first. And then I'll have Sean call names for the folks that are on the teams.
So Nate Kuchar, I'm the AVP of Information Security and the Chief Information Security Officer for UVM Health Network.
Thank you, Nate. Next, let's go to David Kaiser.
Afternoon, I'm Dave Kaiser. I am the Acting Chief Information Security Officer for the Agency of Digital Services, working for the Secretary.
Thank you. Erica Furland.
Director of IT at Burlington Electric Department.
Thank you, Erica. Joe Duncan, are you on?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Oh, there you are.
Yep. Hi, everybody. Joe Duncan. I'm General Manager at Champlain Water District in South Burlington, Vermont, and I am representing A&R.
Thank you very much. We've already heard from Nate. Eric Hillman. Did I pronounce that correct, Eric?
Yeah, you got it right. I'm the Director of Technology at Vermont Gas Systems. Good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you. Eric Foran.
Hi, I'm Eric Foran. I'm the Director of Vermont Emergency Management.
Thank you, Eric. Captain Lone.
Afternoon, I'm Sean Lone. I'm a captain with the state police. I'm the Special Investigations Commander, so I oversee the Vermont Intelligence Center and the FBI Cyber Task Force.
Thank you. General Knight.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Greg Knight, Vermont's Adjutant General.
Thank you. Sue Fritz.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Sue Fritz, and I'm the Director of Technology at Vermont Information Technology Leaders, otherwise known as VITAL.
Thank you, Sue. And I'm going to go back to my list because I already. Justin. Yes, thank you.
Yes, correct. Justin Colbert for the Attorney General's office. Our office investigates data breaches. We cover privacy, AI issues as well.
Thank you. I believe that is everyone that is on the council. So then we have what I've characterized as invited guests. We'll start in the room here. John?
John Kelly, I'm the Chief of Staff for Agency of Digital Services.
And myself, Sean Naylor, kind of Special Programs Director right now, but I was a former CIO and agency secretary prior to Denise. Retired at the end of June after 35 years with the state. As somebody else that I know says, I had a brush with retirement. It was really good for about 5 or 6 months, but realized that I couldn't ice fist my way through all winter. So I ended up coming back here on a part-time basis to work on something that I was actually proud to have championed through the legislature last year. It was a first for us, for state government, the executive branch, on a kind of an enterprise outward looking public facing perspective to get involved with tech policy and looking at cybersecurity, and is there opportunities for things to be done that helps all Vermonters. So here in that capacity, and as the secretary said, it'll transition to me primarily as the chair for this moving forward over the next couple of months. On the phone, I think we have Michelle Anderson, who's joining us.
Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle Anderson. I'm an AAG assigned to ADS, and I'm the counsel to the council. So.
You spell it slightly differently. And last but certainly not least, Mr. Zanin, are you on?
Yep, John Zanin, Special Projects Manager, Governor Scott's office. Had well, just interest in helping support this along its development. So happy to sit in.
Thank you, John. Appreciate that. Did I miss anyone? Excellent. Thank you all. We're moving right along here. Let me go back. I got ahead of myself. So we've gone through the council members, gone through the guests. Now, Secretary, you want to talk a little bit about the council and introduce like the objectives and stuff. So it's all yours.
I love that it's all mine because you're passing the baton because it really was all yours. So I wanted to make sure that we had this first meeting. We all knew why we were coming to the table and what the intent and purpose of the council is. And we've got some work to do in short order, but as a general statement of what this council is for is there was a focus around cybersecurity and critical infrastructure as it pertains to services for Vermonters. There was a bill passed last session that went into effect July 1st that put this advisory council in place. And so the membership is based on statute. And with some of the initial work that needs to get done, although we intended to kickstart this in July, we had a wonderful flood that really took our priority. And so I am appreciative of Sean in helping get the members assigned and us all engaged, and this meeting scheduled in very short order. There are some aspects to the council objective short order, which is a report to legislature around certain aspects that we're going to cover in today's agenda. And from a outcome perspective, I'd really love for you to share, because you were so critical in this process early on as it shepherded through both House and Senate in Vermont to get to where we're at today.
Yeah. I'll give a little backstory. Kick me if I start to like go too long, or anybody there, just raise your hand and I'll take that as a cue that I've been rambling too long. A while back, and I'm going to look to John Zanin because I know this came from the governor's office, the White House, I think it was right after the Russians invaded Ukraine, there was letters of national concern around the status of essential supply chain and critical infrastructure. And while there are I'm going to look a lot at Nate, he's right across from me, unfortunately, but I'll use him as an example, right? In the hospital space, HIPAA, there's federal guidance, and it is fairly mature, right? And I think guides what happens in that space. In other areas, like the public utilities, there is very strong guidance. In other areas, it's maybe not so well defined, maybe water, wastewater, the supply chains that you rely upon to conduct those, to either maintain or operate critical infrastructure or to provide services. And, you know, in looking at it, it felt like there was not this, at least on behalf of Vermont, or something that looked across the different domains to start understanding how Vermonters best served by having strong cybersecurity posture for all of the entities that provide critical services to them, not just state government, not just one industry or another. And so that was what was kind of born, was this, what we crafted, which is the last thing you want as technologists to write legislation, because what we proposed and what ended up being are two different things. But we proposed it. We were over last session. We advocated for it. It went through House Government Operations fairly quickly, got to Senate Government Operations, got modified substantially. And I think for the better. I think it really rounded out what it was. But the idea is that we look for ways to kind of look horizontally across all the different domains that provide those services and ensure that we collectively, right, are in as good a shape cyber-wise as possible. And the examples I like to use, and I used often over there, is that I'm not so worried about a Velco, right? They have the resources. But does Morrisville Water and Electric have the resources to be cyber aware, where somebody like likely Copley Hospital is relying upon them for services to continue to offer their, right? And so it's like, how do we know that there is like a minimum standard being met for the citizenry? You know, we have this obligation to protect, and I think now in our digital world, protection is not just law enforcement, right? It's looking in the cyberspace to offer protection to Vermonters as best we can. So this council was born out of that. The initial charge is to is to make an assessment of the maturity of the different industries across the state. So this is going to be tricky, thinking how we can measure without exposing, right? I mean, that's going to be the interesting thing, because we don't want to necessarily use the results of this in any way to highlight weak links in the chain. What we want to do, though, is understand kind of the diversity of maturity that likely exists out there, which then could hopefully lead to things like establishing maybe mutual aid agreements for things like incident response. How do we start to coalesce around some standard expectations for employee cyber awareness training, you know, different things, just establishing a consistent set of communications channels across all the different disciplines, so that when one group, right, you know, we tend to be, come election time, right, everybody wants to knock on the door of our network when it comes to, you know, gaining access and trying to compromise election security. And so, you know, we may be the first one to see something, but can alert others. And I think that happens now, like I said, in those stovepipes, but what's happening kind of cutting across. And so this is just meant to be the first step of the journey. This enabling legislation, I believe, sunsets in 27. 27. So it's not a go on and on and on. It's a let's see what we can do, and then from there, what should become of it. So this group is intended to, I would say, over the course of the next year, complete that assessment, use the results of that assessment to help drive what the future could look like, right? And to start put a plan together for that, which may mean that this goes away and other things get created, or it may be a maturing of this council, or we'll see where that goes. I'm going to pause there and see if there's anything else you were kind of wanting for me to touch on at this point, or background or expectations.
So I was here for some of this, so I don't have any other questions. I think that you summarized it well. Other than we, the short plan, long-term plan, but that's built into the subsequent agenda. So as an overview of what this council is set forth to do, I want to open it up to any questions that the membership may have around what was just shared. Is everyone in agreement and understanding of what this purpose is based on what we just talked about?
Yes.
Okay, I
Thank
see
you.
some heads nodding, or a yes.
That's great.
If you have questions now, by all means.
And we got thumbs up.
If not, that we can always have a follow-up after this meeting. Because this is kind of covered by, not kind of, but it is covered by open meeting law. Anytime there is a quorum of any of us, like say, I don't know, I think there's a technology thing going on in August
Yes.
that some folks might be invited to, that ADS is hosting. If 6 or more are there at that event, we will not be able to talk, right? I mean, so there's some things we have to be cognizant of, but if you have follow-up questions, by all means, I'd be glad to have conversations to kind of clarify anything that you may have afterwards. Okay. That was easy.
That was great. Yes. So I think that we can move on to the next agenda item.
Excellent.
So I know that we wanted to establish a regular cadence so that there's no surprises, especially given open meeting law. We have a website that Sean Naylor has created that is a public facing website that all of our names are on. And I will let you
Yes.
talk through what the suggestion and discussion is.
All right. Thank you, Secretary. So we have, I labeled this meetings, but it really should be kind of like just administrative activity, right? That we need to do in our first meeting. And I'm going to let Michelle Anderson, our counsel to the council, correct me when I go astray. She's been a tremendous help in getting me guided and started on this. But the best thing to do as to meet the open meeting law expectations is to have a standard meeting cadence by which it's advertised, and then we don't have to warn them as special. Because of the nature of the work that we as a council have to do, and I'm going to pause right here for a second and say that this is my primary focus. I'm not full-time, but this is my primary focus. So my intent is to do as much of the work for this council to bring you. I'll be the author, you all can be editors, right? And you can beat up, and I got thick skin, right? But I will be putting forth all of the things to start from on the work that we're gonna do. I will have something, whether it's a prototype or draft or whatever, to try and make this go as quickly as possible and not ask for a lot of your time other than reviewing outside of the meeting time. So because of that, I was going to propose to just start the conversation, a cadence of every other month meeting. So that would be, let's see, March, May, July, September, and November. So 5 more meetings over the course of this calendar year. It would only be for this calendar year. Because I think once we kind of get to that point, we may have a bigger gap between when we need to get together and make some decisions and keep track of stuff. But that's just a starting point, and I'm open to suggestions from anyone on the council that thinks that's too often. I threw out the 3rd Wednesday of the month. I don't know if that's this Wednesday. I did correct it. I had in there the 3rd Thursday, and she's like, "But we're starting on a Wednesday." I'm like, "Oh, that's a valid point." So to keep with it, open to any questions, comments, feedback. Does that work for you, Nate? Told you I could pick on you. You're gonna never come in person again.
No, it's okay. I'm gonna guilt like at least Erica and probably Sue into coming next time.
Well, we
They both
intended on
actually,
it. I
they
intended
both
on it,
did.
but
I've received emails from both of them apologetically that they could not be here in person, so that was their intent. I will give them points for that. I just saw in the chat, I think it was Joe, was it you that?
Yeah, it works for me.
Okay.
yeah, I think it totally makes
sense.
sense to get started with a schedule that's a little bit more aggressive than. So that works for me.
Okay. Well, I guess we'll do our first action. So if I'm not a council member,
No, you're
so
not.
we will need someone to make a motion and then a second, and then we can vote on this and decide whether or not the third Wednesday every other month, I mean, yes, the third Wednesday of every other month is the thing, so. Would someone be so
moved, Joe
kind to make a
Duncan.
motion?
Joe Duncan, so moved.
Seconded.
Thank you. At this point, will all those in favor signify with an aye?
Right?
I,
Aye.
I,
Okay, thank you. Anybody opposed? Nay? Wow. Where were you all when I was on the school board? That's what I want to say. Nothing there carried on a unanimous first motion, so I appreciate that. Or actually, the hockey board either.
I was gonna say, I think everybody was.
Thank you very much, everyone. I will get those on scheduled probably tomorrow, just so their placeholders are in everyone's calendar and it doesn't sneak up on you. We have, for administrative support purposes, myself, the council, Michelle Anderson, John Zanin from the governor's office, and John Kelly, the ADS chief of staff, here to support the team. So those were characterized, I put them down as invited guests. And it got me wondering that even though the council is prescribed in statute of being comprised of the membership that you all are here, would it benefit us to at the very least make certain entities aware of the meetings and give them like an invitation, right? Make sure that they were aware and stuff. And I was thinking like the CISA or Norwich, Champlain College, entities that we might want to engage with for some work down the road, in that by them having just been aware and listened in, they have the whole backstory. They would not be formal council members, nor would it, like the public, they wouldn't be able to participate until the end of the meeting, until we had like open discussion, which then they could then participate with the group. But I'm mixed on it. I just, trying to anticipate, and was torn whether or not that might be something that would be of value. So I would be curious to hear everyone else's thoughts at this point. Secretary?
There are a number of interested parties. I would say that the list that you came up with is probably parties that we would be interested in ensuring attended. And there may be audiences from the opposite side that they would be interested. So we have had expressed interest from legislature and judiciary as other branches of government who would like to participate. And so we have counterparts in the chief information officer roles or security roles that would be interested as well to be invited, or at least be apprised of this. We have some legislators who have also expressed interest. Given that this is already publicly posted on the website for this council, it's available for everybody. So that was my initial thought is the list can get very long, and so there would need to be some intent behind whether or not this council wanted to extend invitations for interested guests to attend.
Any other thoughts, pro or con?
Sean Lone.
Oh, yes, Sean.
So just from, I did work I ran the Fusion Center for a few years. I think using the cyber analyst, at the Fusion Center, they have a great connection to the federal side of things as well as the classified side for perspective. And the other thing I would mention is that the FBI and Department of Homeland Security information and analysis groups have been huge parts of our election security every year. Well, every 4 years, but so just teams to think about that I think are great at the table. I don't know if you want them every time, but they are major players in the international and national side of cybersecurity. So that's all.
Thank you. Sue.
Yeah, you may have explained this and I didn't catch the nuance, but I just wanted clarity on how these invited guests would be different from just public attending.
So none really, other than I would likely add them to a distribution list to make them aware of when our meetings would be, so it would be top of mind, and not anybody in the general public can actually make that request of us per open meeting law. And I would, if we have special meetings, they can go on a list and I would be obligated to notify them. It's more, would we want to be proactive with these entities, I guess is the question, and just making like our meeting cadence and agendas available to them easier. That's all it would be.
Okay, that's fair. I just wanted to make sure I understood that that's what you said.
Yep.
I mean, I'd agree some of these agencies would be of value to have included. And as long as it's not an administrative burden or, like suggested, difficult to choose from the many valuable entities that could be. So I'm 50-50 on it too. Certainly some of these agencies would add, or organizations would add a lot of value.
The other is we could always just wait until we have an interest, right? Like kind of think Captain Lone alluded to, right? There may be times we want to engage with them. And so depending on our agenda, we just invite them at that point. And I'm good with that. And that's actually probably a little bit more agile than trying to like give it some formality this early on. I just want to make sure it was a talking point. So I'm open to any other suggestions. And if you, like I said, if you have one after the meeting, reach out to me and we can accumulate those for any action for our next meeting.
It may be best to invite them as desired, because you may want to be a little focused and targeted with the conversations, and it may be difficult if you have all of these parties on in one meeting, all finding that as their opportunity to have the input, where you may want to take them a bit at a time.
That's a great point. Okay. So I'm hearing that we really don't need to make a motion or anything because we're not going to do anything in that space, but we'll rely on them finding us and invite them when we're ready. Excellent. Okay. Thank you. This is under the guise of the meetings, but I want to take the pulse on how I provided information in preparation for this meeting. I want to make sure that I'm not over communicating. I'm not under communicating. Is the SharePoint site adequate? When I send out the email with specific links to docs supporting the agenda, did that all feel like you were going to be prepared enough for today's meeting? I want to make sure that I'm going to have you be as efficient as possible when we meet.
I think Sue and Erica shake their head yes. It was sufficient.
We appreciate
It
cameras.
worked flawlessly for me, so I'm happy with it.
I felt very prepared. Thank you, Sean, for that work.
Okay.
And Eric as well. I have a question and maybe a statement to that, where Attorney General Clark is not in attendance, and she was, it looks like you are the her possible delegate. Is that correct, Justin? So I don't
Yeah.
believe that you have access to that SharePoint site. So if you do end up becoming the delegate, that is what Sean was referring to, is that there's an internal state library and basically an internal page that has some information on it, but everyone was given a Vermont.gov account, so a partner account, correct?
For those that are, yes,
Okay,
partner
so
accounts for those that are not state employees who already had one. So like the
Correct.
general already had one,
Mhm.
Sue Fritz already had one from other work that they did, so we repurposed those. But folks like Eric, Erica, Nate, and Joe all received partner accounts. One thing, I was just going to do a quick walkthrough of what's available out there for everyone, just to make sure you're, so this is the Agency of Digital Service, I'm sharing now. So can everybody see it okay? So the Agency of Digital Services web presence under cybersecurity, the council has its own presence. So this is our public facing piece. This will be where we maintain membership information. We have information on our enabling legislation. This is where we'll post meeting notices. The recording will go up here of this meeting afterwards for public access. We'll post our agenda. So right here will be and then we have a little bit of etiquette type stuff. So this is available on our public site. If you are curious or if somebody asks, you can direct them to this. So if they want to know more about the meetings, because it is publicly accessible. We will continue to evolve the SharePoint site. I don't know if anybody actually came to this level or if you just kind of click deep into the documents that I send and link, but I just wanted to make sure everyone was aware that this existed. We're going to try and continue to grow it, so it'll be our point by which everything that we work on will be here. The documents area is where we're collecting all of this. Most of these I sent to you. One thing that I have added is a meetings folder, since you might have looked at it. In there is a document I have that's I'm using for taking notes, attendance and stuff like that, and the motions. So we will have that. The minutes and agenda is in there, and then also today's presentation is in there. So if there's something about it and you don't want to listen to me talk the whole time, you can go back and reference the presentation here. Any questions about that? Because this will be kind of like the basis of where we work from moving forward. All right.
My only ask is if you are unsuccessful accessing that, to let Sean know, and we will get you access if there's an issue.
Yep. Oh, I came back too soon. In there, stop sharing again. I got to go find the document. In there, one of the documents was, I think it was called Council Plan. The last one. Bear with me while I share this out. And I would strongly encourage, if you've not looked at this, to look at it. We will have this as an agenda item for the next meeting to just collect any feedback and have any open discussion on it. But this is kind of like what I've put together, and just a basic set of milestones and activities, managing how we're trying to get the council moving and some of the deliverables for the council. So it outlines only through the end of this state fiscal year, which would be June 30. It has quite a few activities in it. It's really all around getting the council started, developing a survey, administering the survey, and then doing the analysis of the survey responses to get an understanding of the cyber preparedness across the different entities, providing either critical infrastructure operation or essential services. So this is in here. Not going to spend any more time on it. If you have questions, but like I said, look at it and we will have an agenda item on this to clarify anything in the next meeting. I figured it would be a little bit too much to try and go through with everything we had scheduled for today. Stop sharing that. Wish we could share multiple things. All right. And we've already discussed open meeting law. Does anybody have any questions what that means? I only touched on some brief things, but we do have a council to council that could answer any questions that folks may have as to what does that mean for us moving forward as a body.
So actually, I had a clarifying question on if 6 or more of us happen to be in one room. Can you elaborate more on that aspect?
So I think I had that correct. Michelle, help me here, but I believe that means because we have 11 on the council, 6 or more would be a quorum. If you're present anywhere, you cannot, 6 or more present anywhere, you cannot discuss the activities or work of this body in that setting. Did I get
That's
that right,
right.
Michelle?
That's right. Anytime more than a quorum or more of the group meets and they discuss the business of the council, that's a meeting and it must be open, public. So you got to be careful about that, including things like emails, group emails can count as a meeting. Another form, you may just be chatting at a cocktail party, just don't stray into the council business. So,
Yeah,
that answer?
And this is probably a good point to talk about what we spoke about yesterday, which is a little bit of, I don't know if it's confusion, but around online collaboration of documents.
Yeah, there's some interesting ways that it plays out, this requirement that when the group meets and discusses business, that it has to be an open meeting. And technology has kind of impacted this. So a group email, that definitely, I think, would count as a meeting. So if you're all just communicating via email, that's still a meeting. And then if you ever looked at the Secretary of State's very good, although getting old, guide to open meetings, they bring up some other possibilities. And one of them is, group online editing can kind of become a conversation. So that's to be avoided. And you're going to have to figure out like how to do that. I know on other councils, they all do their own editing and then work them together when they're together. Or I don't know. I think that's one of the more tricky ones, or at least to go over them in open meeting and discuss them in open meeting, even if you're providing your edits outside of the meeting, that's probably okay. But that's just one of the areas that was pointed out, and I thought that was a good one. There could be other things. Chats are obviously the same. Go ahead. Sorry, Denise.
No, that's okay. Could you just clarify as far as, so 6 or more, it's really back and forth dialogue, and the same would apply very similarly to if Sean sent a group-wide email out and then everybody started responding back, creating a dialogue. That's what we're talking about. So the same would apply in a physical setting. So if one of us, let's say one of us is presenting at an event and there's 5 others of us there, as long as there's not back and forth dialogue about it, that is not a violation. We can be present while somebody is talking about it. It's just we can't collectively
discuss it.
Continue the conversation.
Yep.
Yes.
Right. If it's really the subject is really the business of the council, then that should be done in open meeting if you're going to be discussing. I have some other examples that I could maybe present for the next meeting too, if you like.
I think it might be helpful if we did it kind of briefly, just to make sure everyone was on the same page. Because one of the things you said is like group emails, right? And so, but administration of the council doesn't meet the
Right.
criteria, right? So by
Purely
sending out the
administrative
meeting,
matters, right, or that's fine. That doesn't count as a discussion of the council's business, so that'd be fine.
so what
But
we'll likely do is, as we have documents to review, is we will ask people, we will put track changes on, we'll ask them, we'll ask you all to probably work within that and post anything via comments and not change the document. And what we won't do is answer anybody in the comments and then bring that up and work through the comments in a warned open meeting, right? So then that way we can have our thoughts prepared in advance, but not, we can meet the intent of what the open
Right.
meeting law is. Is how I would say we would handle it, right? Or that's how I was planning on for the time being. But I just want people to be aware and get an opportunity to ask questions. Any other questions? It was a good one, Erica. Excellent. Okay. Now we're getting into some meat of what we've got to do for our first legislative report. Secretary, you want to?
I'm gonna hand this to you.
Okay. So, as you can see on the screen in front of you, part of what's in Act 71 was that in the first report that we were supposed to deliver, what is this?
Last week.
9 days ago. Because we hadn't had a meeting yet, it's kind of hard to deliver a report from the council. Was a review of the definition in 20 VSA 4662G, recommendations on whether to amend the definition of essential supply chain. And so this is one of those where I working with David Kaiser, we put something out there as a proposal just to get the conversation started around, does there warrant any amendments to the legislation? So that's the charge we have. This is the definition that's currently in statute. That essential supply chain, I'm not going to read it all to you, but it covers these different materials, articles in nature by which they're referenced. Including food systems and thermal systems and fuels. So those last two, I think, were amended last year as a result of what we were doing in Act 71. They actually went back and amended the statute that referenced essential supply chain to add these two in because of discussion that happened primarily in Senate government operations. So it's in essence, those are the things that are in definition. What we said, well, interestingly, what seems to be absent is a reference to information and communication technology as it supports either critical infrastructure or essential supply chain activities. And so we're like, if we're thinking, right, this was our thinking to propose this to the council. If, I don't know, Joe, Mr. Duncan, what's a small municipal water district in Vermont that would be maybe a good example of, like, maybe also maybe the road foreman type thing?
You could, a small one would be Newport, Vermont.
Okay.
Newport
We'll
Center.
pick on Newport Center. They're a small water district, right? The odds of them having somebody designated as a CISO or even with like a security responsibility may or may not be, right? I think we probably, and so if they all of a sudden were, I don't know, their SCADA system was hacked, right? If technology isn't part of what they're looking at to make sure that they have essential supply chain, like contracts in place for replacement computers and software and managed services to help them recover and stuff like that. And it was just to like fittings and plumbing vendors that could help them recover from a physical outage or interruption. That feels like that's a gap, especially since we're charged with cyber. So we were proposing that, but we're open to discussion. We're open to be like, is it implied elsewhere? Are there other elements, as all of you reviewed it, that you felt were missing? I'll open it up to the group.
Two.
I think if I go back to item B, I would want to clarify what articles mean, because it's articles essential to the operation, manufacture, supply, and service or maintenance of critical infrastructure. So loosely, is there a meaning for articles that wouldn't include information and network communications? Articles is not a great word for that, I admit.
Yeah, and I think that's what the legislature was asking for us, right? Is if there was something that maybe they can, in theory, they can have the debate, right? And kind of like decide whether or not they want to clarify articles or identify tech as separate. But I think our charge is like to say, you know, articles does seem to be, and maybe it is defined elsewhere in the statute. I don't know. I have to go back and look and see if they define that. I didn't click the whole statute, just the portion that was relevant to us at the moment. But yeah, that's a valid question. Is that all encompassing? And they can decide that. It's like, well, yeah, it's covered under B anyway, and just dismiss it. But
it reads like physical things.
Yeah. Which, your computers, your network gear and stuff like that, you could cover, but what about software as a service subscriptions? Other things that may be not necessarily physical articles.
Activity itself.
Yeah.
ISP.
Erica. You're on mute.
I think David was ahead of me.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
David Kaiser.
I think another element to think about in this context is the data itself and whether that's critical infrastructure. I think one of the major things that we've been seeing in both commercial spaces and DoD on the government side is a rethinking of how data becomes its own valuable asset when you're thinking about operational impacts in the environment that you're dealing with, right? So I think a carve out for data at a minimum, and I would say the whole category that we referenced is the reason that I came and made that proposal in the first place. And then Sean and I had that conversation, and there is some pushback that's happened, right? So I think it's worth a conversation, but that idea that data becomes its own primary source of creating an effect in the environment you're trying to create or work with is definitely worth putting on the table.
Thank you, David. Erica.
The thing that I would call out, and I don't know how we do this under the term articles, but the people power, right? Like IT is such a knowledge-based world that a critical part of my supply chain are my people, and especially for the smaller municipal utilities, people are critical bottleneck for them as well.
Thank you. Other thoughts?
So I would be interested to hear from Justin from the AG's perspective, given that, from the council to our council would also be an option, but as a member, I'm interested to hear Justin's take on this because what I'm back and forth on is whether or not we are adding additional context to what's already stated and just digging deeper, or if it's actually not represented in what is currently considered to be essential supply chain.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if Michelle might have thoughts. Yeah, I'm not sure if this is something that we need to formally amend versus just sort of add on without a formal amendment, if that's what I'm understanding the question to be.
Well, it's more that is what Sue has shared, what Erica has shared, what David has shared is we're starting to go deep into specificities around what would be considered supply chain, which is called out in some of the other areas. But if you look at, item number B, articles of essential operation, manufacture, supply, service, and maintenance, would technology and digital data be part of that? And as Erica pointed out, would staff and knowledgeable staff be part of that? And having that legal lens would be helpful as we, work to submit something more formal.
Yeah, I see. I would think we could include that without formally amending it. But I haven't read the full statute to see if it says anything like including but not limited to or anything like that. I don't know, Michelle, do you think we need to amend it to include those things? Or I feel like we could just define it as technology and digital data should be included in B.
Yeah, I don't know that a formal amendment is needed either to discuss anything related to this, but I think we also noticed that certain sectors aren't even included here, like, what was it? Internet service providers. So, maybe that was carved out on purpose. I'm not sure, maybe just a clarification of intent might be helpful. There's a hand up. Sorry.
Yeah, Sue?
Yeah, I think that's where I was going, is I'd like a clarify of intent, just from the language of defining essential supply chain as supply chains for the production in sufficient quantity of the following articles. It sounds very physical based, very noun based. It's not about what Erica's talking about with people. It's not about what we're talking about with the services from internet service providers. It sounds almost as maybe an artifact of where we were with COVID, that we knew we just needed tests and we needed masks and we needed physical supplies. And it's not something that's really broad enough in intent the way it's described.
So
And
I'm
maybe
trying
there's
to,
another area that the data and things like that would better fit into, and a different part of the statute.
so there's other statutes that define critical infrastructure, which includes ISPs, communications. I can't remember, right? But I mean, it's like transportation, all of the things that would be critical infrastructure. So the ISPs and stuff kind of fit more in that definition. And I'm going to go back to try and remember the conversations in Senate GovOps last session, right? I'm going to look at JK because he was in the room. It's an eye on that. And it was driven by how do we make sure when we're going through this effort that the people, the industries that support the critical industries are part of the understanding the landscape, right? So if Nate's here, but I mean, the hospital is such a great example, right? Because you have got two probably super critical partners on the phone with you right here, right? Your electricity, I'm assuming that at least at some of your sites comes from Burlington Electric, right? You probably get most of your drinking water from the Champlain Water District. You have a vested interest in making sure the hospital could be brought to its knees if one of them has an issue, right? That causes, right, you to be impacted. And so the thinking was, you know, it ends up being like the spider web, right? It's like when you look at one area, what are the different areas that have to also be participatory in order for us to feel confident that the critical infrastructure or essential services, no matter what is thrown at them, has done due diligence to be prepared to operate the next day. And so that was the kind of the context for it, which is why when David Kaiser and I talked about it, it's like, yeah, maybe it feels like, maybe it can be implied in there, but does calling out technology as we do work, and we work with the Newport Village water districts, Newport Center, that starts to become more of an awareness for them, right? And that the statute helps them think beyond oh yeah, I've got C2 on contract, so I should be good. Well, does that, right? You know. So that was the kind of the discussions that led to it, and I would say probably why we were proposing that addition.
I think that may be covered separately though, is what we're talking about in the critical infrastructure definitions, more so than the supply chain. There's very much a cross web between the critical infrastructures.
Yeah.
We're like, we have a bi-directional critical infrastructure between like Erica and myself, because while we need her for power, she needs us to make sure her people are healthy so that they can show up for work. That's the people side that she was talking about. I think that essential supply chain language, at least how it's written, I agree with Sue, really reads it's about
The physical.
things.
Yeah.
Not about services, and the services would be
The
the critical infrastructure. And so I think rather it'd be more a case of if we have a gap of a service that we know the critical infrastructures are relying upon, that itself isn't defined as critical infrastructure, that may be where we need to consider, and do we have a gap in that critical infrastructure definition, and that we don't even have a player in the room.
So in anticipation of this, I hope I didn't make anybody sick watching me like roller wheel down to this piece of legislation. I had, in the enabling legislation doc, I had gone through, and probably after some of you looked at it, added in the, for reference, 11 VSA 1701, which defines the critical infrastructure side of it, because it's referenced in Act 71 and what empowers us. But if you notice, right, critical infrastructure definition: property and equipment owned or used, communication networks, electric generation, transmission, distribution, water, wastewater, health, essential supply chains, thermal fuel systems, communication networks, including cellular, broadband, and telecom. What's interesting is they've defined all that, but a number of them, mostly communications, is not represented in this council, right? Which is, you know, I thought was an interesting, I guess, outcome. And so I'm like trying to figure out in my head, does that mean that we have to lean heavier on the essential supply chain to support what the council's doing because they're not represented there? I don't know. But you're right. I mean, because it talks about property and equipment. So that is likely covered underneath that definition of critical infrastructure for things like hardware, software, ISPs. So.
Yeah, I think I was going exactly where you were going, in that I was looking at this definition for critical infrastructure and commenting on, I'm confused at the circular reference of suggesting that communication networks are part of supply chain, but yet they're also considered part of critical infrastructure. And to your point, there seems to be a gap in including that.
Yeah.
In this council.
Which will be, as I'm trying to like anticipate down the road, when we try to do an assessment and issue our survey, if they're not part of this, someone representing that, this survey is going to come out of the blue to them, right? So it's going to be an interesting process to try and get them engaged without having them being named as part of the council. Which we don't need to address right now, but maybe is something that, because they've already started for the year, but maybe something as we get towards the end of this calendar year is something that we want ADS to propose as amending the legislation to add them to the council, right, as something, as an expansion. So what I'm hearing is, right, and I'm going to summarize based on the conversation we've had, that amending with F seems that it's not warranted, that this, between the critical infrastructure definition and what's already done in the definition of essential supply chains, people feel like that covers what we need to be able to do and not have any, we don't need anything additional at this time. I'm getting nodding in the room, which probably, since the secretary's head's only like that big, might not be, you might not be able to see, but can I get a pulse on it? Is that a safe statement for those that have been quietly listening to those that have been talking?
And you can do a hand raised if you would prefer, just so that we see who's
I think so, yeah.
Okay,
perfect.
so we will not put forth a suggestion for F then. Okay, any other, oh, we're gonna hand up.
Oh, I think, yeah, Eric put his hand up because I asked.
Oh, okay.
He was
Do you have a question, Eric, or was I just acknowledging the secretary's request?
No, I was just acknowledging, no question.
Thank you. Any other, why we have the enabling legislation open, right? And we were reviewing essential supply chain language. Does anybody else have any other questions as what was outlined in Act 71? And as it relates to our mission? Go back up to. Not gonna miss next year's January 15th.
Well, don't say we're not. If there is another flood or some sort of,
I'll write it right now,
Emergency
just have it sitting on the SharePoint site, so you can just send it next year.
I think the intent to here, if I could add a comment, is making this meaningful. This is the first council of its kind across the US. We're the first state to actually bring something like this forward. And so the results that come out of this council are going to be, in my hope and my expectation, impactful and set some standards. And those standards do create a little bit of angst for those that don't really know what that means, but it's an opportunity for collaboration and support among this broader community. And the cyber risk for every industry, every organization, and every individual is only increasing. And so I think that we have an opportunity to kind of be ahead of where our peers across other states are. And I open that up as an opportunity for conversation too, because we're focusing on getting a report delivered as that first step. But we've got a couple of years of working together that is going to net some additional outcomes that this group of members are going to be influencing. And so if there's any questions around that, I'd like to at least get that opened up for the first meeting. I know in my voice it doesn't sound like this, but this is very exciting. In the tech space, this is, for me, this is huge. And
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of potential here with this group.
I'll share a conversation I had last year, probably not about this time, it was probably maybe April. So Dan Bennett is the CEO of Gifford Medical Center. His brother was my best man, and I've known Dan since he was probably that tall. He calls me up and he's like, Sean, we don't need more mandates. I'm like, man, this is not about mandates. What we're trying to do is build a community more than anything, right? Is that how do we figure out a way that we you know, I don't know if Governor Knight's, General Knight is, I've already promoted you, General. I don't know if he said he had to leave early, so it's probably not on. I
Ran
didn't
away
hear
before you
that.
get that appointment.
That's all right, it's recorded.
But, you know, how can, you know, can't remember what, the 229th, is that, the Cyber Squadron, David?
Yeah, it's the one in Northfield for the Air National Guard.
Yeah, right, you know, it's like, how does that become a resource that can be engaged? Because we have established and open communication channels and protocols, and so that if the UVM Health Network, heaven forbid, no, we're not gonna pick on you. What's the one in St. Johnsbury, Northeastern Medical Center, whatever, the St. Johnsbury Hospital.
Yeah.
Right, if they have some sort of event, there's already like things established by which, regardless of discipline, there's ways to engage and help them. So, Sue.
It's really encouraging to hear you saying this, because as I read this, I was like, boy, this almost sounds like it's not about mandates. It almost sounds like it's a positive step forward to what you're talking about with collaboration. Because I'm, you know, like as you opened the meeting, we all have our mandates already. I empathize with Erica. I know the mandates that she works with quite well. And I'm, you know, obviously Nate and I know HIPAA. So we've got our mandates, we've got our amount, you know, so this to me is about enabling the mandates for everybody, because, you know, we know it takes people, it takes staff, it takes time, it takes money to do all this work. So it's great to see that this is less about reinventing a new mandate for us all to follow and more about helping us all achieve that.
Yeah, and I think it's like, how do we, in the state cybersecurity space, right? The discussion for the last couple of years has been, how do you get a whole of state approach or an all of state approach, right? This is that, right? How do we not look to disciplines vertically, but start to cut across? And so there may be, right, and I'm gonna, John Zannon's on from the governor's office, right? We may end up getting to the point where we recommend some sort of legislation that gives some power somewhere to help make this happen. But it's going to be because as a group, we work through it all and realize that that's a gap that needs to be filled in order for this community to realize the value for Vermonters. And so,
Yeah, I would just say, I really appreciate the participatory approach and the cross-sector approach to it. We straddle both sides of the lake, and I can tell you that our neighboring state has taken a less participatory approach, and also looks at it vertical by vertical. So they have a group that has put out financial targets and regulations.
Yeah.
They have a proposed legislation for cybersecurity and healthcare right now. So they're not looking critical infrastructure together, and there was no involvement from the sector in identifying what the needs are. So this approach, I think, is a much more beneficial to the state as a whole.
thank you. I think that puts us onto our last next to the last agenda item. Bear with me while I get if there's no other comments or questions, or you would pose, you know, asking if there was any other items. All right. So the next to the last item was the review of the draft legislative report. Obviously, it has an edit that has to be performed, striking the proposal of F for the technology. And it is basic because of the nature of we're just forming. Did anybody have questions, comments, concerns? If that report with these removal of section F was to be submitted to the legislature on behalf of this council, do you not want, is there anything that's like bothers you to have your name associated with it at this point? Open it up for questions, comments, concerns. We'll bring the report up in case anybody has any specific references that want to talk to.
John, would you be looking for a motion at this point?
The discussion before the motion, if there are any changes other than striking the proposed language on F under the supply chain.
Yeah, so, yeah, thank you. Any discussion
We're a good team.
before we get into making that motion?
Someone drives.
Because I can actually, I will edit it right now. So then that way the motion. And then I will insert the, whatever the statutory reference is there. Any other thoughts? Then, so I'll make it easy. We have the few minutes. It cover an executive summary just recaps what's in here, the enabling legislation for their recollection. The membership, I think I have this current, with the exception of Attorney General Clark. If you want me to change that, please let me know.
And I just, I guess I'll ask a point. Justin, should we assume that change or leave it as Charity Clark for this report?
I think for this report, you could put my name on it.
Kiddo. Kolber, correct? You get to watch in real time how slow I type.
Assistant Attorney General.
Minor edit, you can just flip the word network for the word information in my job title.
Gotcha. I wonder where I got that from. I've been the
It's
hospital
super
associate.
confusing because I'm the network associate vice president of security.
All right. So we've got Justin in there as Assistant Attorney General. Oh, sorry. Who's got their hand up?
I do. It's Sean Loam from VSP. If you go back
Yes.
up there, I'm actually not the Homeland Security Advisor. Commissioner Jennifer Morrison is. So I'm here on her behalf, but like permanently. So I would be I don't know if you want to change that to Special Investigations Commander or just State Police, whichever would be easiest for you.
Yeah, I was curious about that. Because the statute says the Homeland Security Advisor or designee.
And he's
Doesn't say the
designee.
commissioner, right? And so I'm like, should I just put Homeland Security Advisor or designee?
I would be the designee then. Yep, that would be fine. I do this role a lot because of her schedule, and
Yep.
I'm involved in the Homeland Security side. So, yep. Thank you.
Well, I think it's great, given you're also with the Vic and everything else. So that's a great connection. Thank you. And so I'll just do it as Homeland Security Advisor designee. All right. Any other questions? So the brief paragraph on which really nothing happened until December when I came back and started getting things organized. And then it lays out just high level bullets of what we're gonna do through the end of the fiscal year, executing the survey. And then our language review, which we offer pretty straightforward, 5 pages.
So we would just need a motion.
Yep.
To approve the report as is and submit to legislature.
Are you making that motion?
As the chair, I'm not,
I know.
but I will look to one of the members to do so and somebody to second. Or Nate.
I
Eric
will make
was
the
so
motion
excited to do it earlier.
Erica makes the motion.
A second.
to-
Sentence?
And Sue a second. And the motion is to submit as edited just now, right?
Yes.
Correct.
Perfect. Thank you. All those in favor?
I,
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. All those opposed? Any abstentions? Forgot to ask that the first time. Excellent. Carries. Thank you very much. And with 10 minutes and change to go, we are to the open discussion, question and answer. So for anything that as folks that we haven't talked about, this is the open time, and also for anyone from the general public to get anybody from the general public join. So any other items that people would want to discuss with the group? Okay. I will not make you sit here for 10 minutes. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Excellent. Thank you all very much for a great first meeting, and we'll see you in 2 months. But look forward to
All
emails
right.
from me.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank-